16 scientists cracked, but the secretary's 3-minute solution haunts the millionaire CEO. In a world bursting with secrets and betrayal, the night sky overhead clashed with ominous storm clouds while a single mansion loomed on the edge of the cliff, shrouded in darkness. It was here that whispers of dread bounced off the opulent walls, echoing through the shadows where 15 elite scientists bent beneath their own desperation. Each one gathered with sharpened eyes and sinking hope, but their latest experiment had gone up in flames, leaving them shattered and defeated. Little did they know that a simple secretary, with her unassuming charm, would soon unravel more than they could ever fathom. Margaret, the unassuming secretary, held the key. With humble beginnings, she waited quietly in the corner, her fingers trembling as she flipped through pages filled with complex equations. But within those ordinary sheets lay a spark: hidden notes, reckless calculations, and a whispered theory that sent shivers down her spine. The scientists were baffled, trying to break the code of nature while she was cooking up an answer that no one expected. How did she know? What was her secret? The air crackled with tension as the clock ticked down. One last chance before their funding was cut, before they sent their best chance spiraling away. The flash of lightning outside illuminated Margaret's face, revealing a flicker of uncertainty and fear. With her heart racing, she stood, ready to admit that she could offer a solution, but would they listen? The silence in the room was thick enough to slice, she could feel their judgment weighing heavily. This might sound insane, she started, and just as she was about to unveil her 3-minute solution, the large, grand doors swung open, pounding like thunder. A ghostly figure stepped through, a look of fury etched on his face. The millionaire CEO, infamous for his ruthless decisions, loomed in the doorway, casting a shadow that swallowed the light. The scientists collectively gasped, eyes darting between him and Margaret. What had they kept from him? His presence shifted the balance, and every heartbeat seemed to pulse like a ticking time bomb. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The tension reached a fever pitch as Margaret locked eyes with the CEO. His words sliced through the silence, a thunderous echo of disbelief. You think you can solve this? He barked, fists clenched, his voice trembling with an unexpected mix of anger and fear. The scientists shifted awkwardly, faces pale, unsure if they should step in. But Margaret, feeling the weight of their hopes, knew she had come too far to back down. A cold sweat dripped down her spine as she took a step forward. I know I can, she breathed, each word heavy with determination. The silence grew thicker, a storm brewing not just outside but within as they all waited. Who would break first? What would she unleash? The air was electric with the question, what if she held the true answer? Margaret's heart thundered loud enough to drown out the crackle of lightning outside as she stood before the CEO, her mind racing. This was at the moment that would either break her or lift her into the unforeseen heights. The mixed emotions swirling in her gut felt like a tempest, but she took a deep breath, finding courage in the chaos. Let me explain, Margaret pleaded, her voice barely above a whisper, yet it sliced through the tension thick in the air. The CEO's frown deepened, his steely glare making it clear that he wouldn't tolerate her hesitation. Your explanations mean very little to me, Secretary. I want results, not your scribbles, he snapped, pacing like a predator eyeing its prey. The other scientists watched in apprehensive silence. A few exchanged glances, their eyes pleading for Margaret to articulate her theory, while others stared at the floor, fearing what would happen next. The clock continued its relentless tick, menacingly reminding them of their dwindling time. She had 3 minutes, and Margaret clenched her fists, summoning the words she had practiced in her mind 1,000 times. It all comes down to manipulation of the elementals. The CEO paused mid-step, eyebrows arched in skepticism. Elementals? Preposterous. We deal with facts, theories, and controlled experiments exactly. She interrupted, emboldened by the rising tide of desperation. But what if we don't have to break the laws of nature to make this work? Margaret gestured to the papers sprawled before her, detailing her unconventional approach. I've checked the variables that you all overlooked. The simulations I ran get to the point. Barked the CEO, cutting her off. His impatience crackled like the storm outside. With her heart pounding, she gathered herself again and continued, what if we can affect molecular structures without traditional means? Manipulating the energy states, we can achieve this in a manner that hides in plain sight. The scientists leaned in, captivated by her confidence. Disbelief turned to intrigue as whispers rippled through the room. But how? Muttered one of the scientists, struggling to comprehend her bold claims. Margaret met his gaze, a fire igniting within her chest. We combine sound frequencies with chemical bonding. Maybe even light. We harness elements the way no one has before. Think of it, unlocking energy through vibrations. The CEO narrowed his eyes, contemplating her words like an unsolved puzzle. And how do you propose we test this? Seems like quite the gamble, he replied, his voice laced with cynicism. Tension filled the room. The scientists were uncertain, torn between the impossible hope Margaret offered and the weight of reality. Silence enveloped them until the CEO broke it once more. You have exactly 1 hour to prove your theory, or I will shut down this whole operation. Shockwaves rippled through the scientists, but beneath the disbelief was a small flicker of excitement. Hope stirred in Margaret's chest. You won't regret it, she replied softly, though uncertainty gnawed at her. The CEO turned on his heel, loathing and doubt intermingling in his darkened gaze. He stepped through the grand doors, casting a long shadow behind him. Just as they clicked shut, Margaret felt a surge of adrenaline rush through her veins, a mingling of fear and purpose. Margaret, do you really think you can do this? Asked a scientist, voice trembling. I have to, she murmured, for all of us. But the deeper question burrowed into her mind, freezing her thoughts. What if she couldn't? If she failed in her attempt to unveil the mystery of the elementals, would everything fall apart? The ticking clock loomed behind her. Time was slipping away, and the storm roared above them, but they had to act. With determination, she turned back to her notes, ready to forge a path through the unknown. Yet, in the back of her mind, a haunting question lingered: what if her discovery unleashed a power they were not prepared to handle? And as she launched into her work, a crash of thunder sounded, echoing her internal turmoil. Would her next steps lead to revelation or ruin? Margaret flipped through her notes, each page a chaotic scribble of data and concepts that felt both prophetic and fragile. Her heart raced with the weight of decision. The clock ticked ominously, a countdown shrouded in uncertainty. Here goes nothing, she whispered to herself, fingers trembling as she clutched the edge of the table. The other scientists gathered closer, their faces drawn tight with a mix of anxiety and reluctant hope. One of them, Dr. Chan, stepped forward, concern etched in his features. Margaret, if we do this, we need to be sure. The last thing we want is to make a wrong move, he cautioned, his voice hoarse. The others nodded, and the gravity of the moment pressed down like an anchor. Yes, I understand, she replied, forcing a steadiness into her voice. But we won't know until we try. We need to harness the sound waves first. Let us set up the equipment. We can adjust the frequency in real time. The scientists exchanged glances, each weighing the risk against the faint pulse of possibility growing louder. As they scrambled to arrange the apparatus, Margaret's thoughts danced between excitement and dread. Wait, a voice echoed from the back. It was Lila, the youngest in the group, her voice quivering with unease. What if we stir something that we can't control? Her words hung in the air, thick with foreboding. Would the experiment unleash a force they were not ready to face? The mere notion sent chills down Margaret's spine. "I promise we'll remain cautious," Margaret said, rallying her nerves, though doubt gnawed at her resolve. She took a step toward the table piled with instruments, a jumble of wires and electrodes. "We'll monitor everything. If it feels wrong, we stop." The murmurs of the group shifted from fear to a reluctant sense of purpose. They started positioning the equipment, their movements suddenly more than just hurried, they were infused with desperation, as though their lives hinged on this moment. Once the setup was complete, Margaret took a position at the controls. She inhaled sharply, suppressing the vortex of anxiety swirling in her stomach. A countdown timer was displayed, a reminder of the limited time they had. "Let us start with a low frequency," she instructed, voice trembling with authority. "Begin at 5 Hz. The others nodded, fingers dancing over buttons and dials. A low hum vibrated through the air, pulsing against their ears like a heartbeat. The atmosphere thickened, darkening under the weight of anticipation, and Margaret's pulse synced with the rhythmic thrum. As she adjusted the frequency, something peculiar began to happen. The equipment flickered and crackled. Eyes widened as a sudden flash of light surged from the apparatus, illuminating the room with an ethereal glow. "What is that?" cried Dr. Chan, taking a step back, fear splashed across his face. I don't know," Margaret stammered, her heart pounding like thunder in her chest. The room seemed to vibrate with a strange energy, one that felt both alive and menacing. The monitor display began to spike erratically, beeping with an urgency that echoed the chaos brewing in her mind. The energy levels increased, and suddenly, an electric shock rushed through the air, making the hair on their arms stand straight up. "Shut it off! Shut it off!" Lila screamed, but Margaret couldn't move. She was transfixed, watching the pulse of energy flicker and writhe, almost as if it were alive, craving release. Panic erupted as numbers on the monitor shot up. "Margaret, this is too much!" Dr. Chan shouted, rushing to her side. "I need a minute," she cried, clenching her jaw. But that minute was slipping away, and she felt the weight of every second bearing down on her. What had she unleashed? Thunder roared in tandem with the chaos, shaking the foundations of the building. The storm outside mirrored the tempest within. Would this moment that was supposed to be their breakthrough turn into their downfall? In that split second, Margaret realized she had to decide, forge ahead or retreat into the safety of the known, risking everything on the edge of the unknown. Her breath caught in her throat, and the decision loomed heavy. What if they plunged into chaos, discovering a power that could change everything, or worse, destroy them all? The room pulsed with energy, a tangible tension wrapping around Margaret and the team like a noose. The chaotic beeping of the monitor shot into a frenzy, each sound an urgent plea. "Margaret!" Dr. Chan yelled, his voice slicing through the charged air. "We can't sustain this. You have to make a call." But all she could feel was the desire to peel back the layers of fear gripping her heart. The flashing lights felt almost alive, thrumming with a power that called to her, begged for release. Suddenly, a violent spark erupted from the equipment, and the lights dimmed momentarily before flickering back to life. One of the massive machines shuddered, and a low groan erupted from deep within it, like the growl of a waking beast. "Is it supposed to do that?" Lila's voice trembled, eyes wide as she clutched the edge of the table. "No!" Margaret shouted back, forcing her shake of disbelief deep down inside. "It can't." Dr. Chan backed away, anxiety pulsing through his features. "We need to pull the plug," he insisted, hands trembling over the emergency switch. "No." Margaret's voice was sharp like a whip. "We're so close. I can feel it." Her heart raced, not yet willing to abandon what could be a landmark breakthrough, but the room began to quake, the low hum shifting into a menacing roar. The instruments rattled violently, sending a shockwave through the space. Margaret gripped the control panel, her knuckles white. "Margaret!" Lila screamed again, but her words were drowned out by the cacophony. A deep, reverberating sound emerged more than just a vibration. It was as if the very air had been sucked into a void, leaving only a chilling silence, one that prickled at their skin. Time seemed to stretch as Margaret's eyes darted around the room, witnessing fear reflected in everyone's faces. Then it happened. The world outside seemed to vanish in an instant as an explosion of light rocketed from the apparatus, filling every inch of the lab with a blinding luminance. Moments later, Margaret felt a sharp pulse slam against her chest, like a raw wave smashing into the shore. "Shut it down. Now!" Dr. Chan's order was lost in the noise, drowned out by the sudden chaos of blinding light and rumbling energy. The other scientists recoiled, their instincts screaming at them to flee. Everything blurred as the lab quaked more violently, shelves crashing down, instruments hurling from their places, and the fear in Margaret's chest morphed into a fierce determination. She was going to let all their hard work dissolve in the chaos. "Lila! Help me!" she shouted, thrusting her hands over the controls, eyes blazing with resolve. "We can adjust the frequency, find a balance." "What? Are you insane?" Lila countered, eyes wide. "Trust me." Lila steadied herself, the fear in her eyes slowly dissolving into a fierce will to fight. She moved closer, pressing buttons, aligning the settings as Margaret directed. With a deep breath, Margaret pushed down a lever, her heart racing as she felt their fates hang on the edge of her decision. The lab shook violently, the electric energy wrapping around them like a storm. They were either going to stabilize it or Margaret. Came Dr. Chan's frantic voice amidst the chaos. Ignoring him, she squeezed her eyes shut and concentrated. The flickering lights and roaring energy spiraled into a crescendo. This was it. Suddenly, everything shattered. A deafening silence engulfed them, the world reduced to a stillness so profound it felt unnatural. Her eyes snapped open to a scene that froze her blood. The scientists were frozen in time, a snapshot of fear. The once raging storm outside had quieted. The weight of the world, the pulse of energy, all but hollowed out, creating a gaping void around them. "What have we done?" Margaret whispered, her voice barely a breath, and as flashes of realization began to pierce through the thick fog, one terrible thought loomed over her like a dark shadow. Had they really unlocked something truly beyond comprehension? And then, the shadows began to stir. Margaret's heart raced. Was something else in the room with them? Now? What had they truly awakened? Margaret's pulse quickened as the shadows danced around her, each flicker hinting at a life of its own. Goosebumps raced across her skin, and her breath caught in her throat. No one moved. They were still trapped, all their expressions locked in the grip of fear. Lila's voice trembled, dragging the word out as if it were a plea for salvation. But there was no escape from this void. From the corner of the lab, a dark mass slithered closer, shaped like a writhing black smoke yet distinct enough to remind Margaret of a figure, a breach between worlds. The intensity of its essence swirled and pulsed, matching the frantic rhythm of the heartbeat trapped inside her chest. "What is that?" Dr. Chan finally whispered, his eyes wide, searching for answers in the middle of the chaos. It's like it's feeding off the energy we released," Margaret gasped, her mind racing, struggling to piece together the terrifying anomaly that had emerged from their failed experiment. The air thickened with dread, she felt it weighing down on her, compressing her thoughts. Why won't it just come out? Lila's face was ghostly pale, revealing a mixture of confusion and revulsion that mirrored Margaret's own. The darkness shifted again, pulsing rhythmically, and dropped to the floor, forming an undulating shape that seemed to grow more solid by the second. It loomed over the control panel, creeping toward the very source of their nightmare. The monitor flashed intermittently, and each flicker revealed glimpses of a furious, swirling mess of energy that begged for escape. "Whatever we've done, we may be unable to reverse it," Margaret said, her voice strained. She clenched her fists, muscles tense with the weight of impending responsibility. We might have invited something into our world. An unearthly growl reverberated in the room, echoing off the walls like an ancient echo from a long-buried secret. It sent shivers down Margaret's spine, and she clenched her jaw. We have to move. We have to contain it. Dr. Chan turned back to the emergency switch, panic flashing in his eyes. But what if we only make it worse? He hesitated, his rational mind struggling against the instinct to flee. Trust Margaret. Lila yelled, stepping forward, determined. We're not going to just run. We need to think. But another wave of shadow loomed closer, a dark tendril reaching out as if trying to grasp the essence of their horrified expressions. Margaret's chest tightened. Without a plan, they were smoke amid a raging fire. Okay, we need to isolate the energy source, cut it off from whatever that is. She shouted, urgency pouring from her. Dr. Chan switched to manual control. Lila, can you find a way to stabilize the power supply? We have to contain it before it spreads. How? Lila asked, eyes darting between Margaret and the ominous mass slowly dominating the room. I don't know, but we have to act now. Each word felt like a blade as Margaret fought to steady her nerves, the reality of their situation crashing against her. Just as they huddled closer, a tremor surged through the lab once again, the shadows seemed to writhe with even more fury, and the air crackled with energy. The monitors screamed as data poured in, indicating instability within the core reactor. Time was slipping away like grains of sand. Margaret. Dr. Chan warned, and she looked toward him, finding his face pale as he pointed at the zapping lights. Her throat constricted as she looked to the apparatus, just as another blinding pulse blasted through the room. The shadows recoiled momentarily, revealing a glimpse of twisted, otherworldly forms lurking just beyond the walls of reality. Then, an eerie voice whispered through the chaos, a chilling promise that made her blood run cold. You've opened the door. What were they inviting? The grasp of something far more sinister than they could comprehend hovered just at the threshold. With a final glance at her colleagues, determination surged through Margaret. They had to confront whatever they'd set free, or they'd be ensnared in the grip of this new terror. Forever. Whatever that thing is, we need to put it back. She commanded, heart racing as she stepped towards the apparatus again, bracing herself for the worst. But in that moment of confrontation, something deep within her stirred an unexpected strength begging to be unleashed. What had they truly awakened? And would that power destroy them all? The chaos erupted in a furious crescendo, the lab vibrating as if the very walls were protesting their actions. Shadows writhed and coiled, cutting through the air like sinister serpents, darting in and out of the flickering lights. Margaret. Do something. Lila's voice was a blend of desperation and fear, and it snapped Margaret back into focus. The weight of the looming darkness felt unbearable, yet she knew they had to act. With one swift motion, she dashed to the control panel, her fingers trembling as they hovered over the emergency switch. The numbers on the screen spiked erratically, a vivid red warning casting an ominous glow. Dr. Chan was muttering something to himself, his brow furrowed as he wrestled with the implications of shutting down their work. Lila searched for a manual, her hands fumbling through the chaos, each second dragging like a lead weight. What if we lose it forever? Better than letting it devour us. Margaret shot back, her insides roiling. She could feel the chill of the creature, creeping ever closer, almost tasting the energy that now surged in the air like a storm. Margaret, Dr. Chan interjected, his voice sharp. If we trigger the emergency shutdown, the energy will collapse all at once. It could consume everything. Or we might just end this nightmare. She argued, feeling her resolve harden. She couldn't bury her head in the sand now, not when the fate of their world felt so precarious. As the shadows pulled back momentarily, it revealed more of the spectral forms lurking just outside their vision, figures twisted and wrong. A cold sweat broke out on her brow. They were playing with forces beyond their control, and all that stood between them and oblivion was their naive ambition. Margaret! Lila cried out again, fear locking her face in a pained expression. You must choose. Suddenly, a jolt ran through the equipment, and the lights flickered out completely. The lab was plunged into darkness. In the suffocating silence, Margaret could hear the harsh breaths of her colleagues. An electric hum buzzed in the air, making the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. Then she heard it, the voice again, even clearer somehow, curling around her like smoke, "You can't put the darkness back." Panic rippled through her. No. I refuse to let it take anyone else. Her heart raced as she forced her hands back to the control panel, feeling the heat radiating through it. She felt an unusual connection, a tug in her mind, whispers invading her consciousness, but she pushed them aside. Just one more second. She pleaded, her fingers dancing over the controls, a mixture of chaos and clarity racing through her. We can find a way. Suddenly, a surge of energy exploded forth from the apparatus, filling the room with a blinding white light. It momentarily illuminated the horrified expressions of Dr. Chan and Lila, their faces etched with doubt and fear. The shadows screamed, a cacophony of tortured voices echoing through the darkness, pinching at her heart. The energy coiled around her, emanating from the device with ferocious intensity. Margaret, please. Dr. Chan's voice pierced the chaos, edged with urgency. You need to see the truth of what lies behind this. What truth? A shudder coursed through her, an unsettling twist in her stomach. She couldn't turn back now. Not when it felt like the world was unraveling around them. Just then, the darkness lunged, a streaming shadow that aimed to engulf her whole. She felt its essence tugging at her, a cold void that threatened to swallow her alive. Margaret braced herself, summoning every ounce of strength. Get to the reactor. She shouted over the rising turmoil. I can hold it back. But as she steadied herself, an image flashed before her eyes, one of a million futures swarming with shadowy chaos. Something hidden within her urged her forward, revealing a power she didn't understand. And then, amid the chaos, she glimpsed a truth far more terrifying than anything she could have imagined. What if this was only the beginning? As the shadows encroached, Margaret's heart thundered. Knowing that what came next would decide their fate. What lay beyond that veil of darkness? What would she have to sacrifice to confront it? The blinding light surged and shattered the shadows, if only for a moment, and in that blink, Margaret saw a flicker of hope. She felt the heat from the apparatus swirl around her, a forceful energy challenging the darkness. It was exhilarating and terrifying. Do it, Margaret. Lila shouted, her voice wavering but strong. Just hit the switch. But the voice, that ethereal whisper, hissed through the air. You think it ends with a switch? Margaret's breath hitched. Instead of comfort, that thought spread panic within her. The shadows seemed to absorb the light as if they were thirsty, reaching out to claw and crush everything that stood in their path. Keep moving. Dr. Chan yanked Lila away from the deepening darkness. The two of them darted toward the reactor, their frantic movements shining a brief path through the horror. Margaret clenched her teeth, one last reluctant glance at the agony displayed in Lila's eyes and the desperation in Dr. Chan's expression, before she turned back to the console. I can't just destroy it. It's too valuable, too powerful. The lights flickered again, and she felt the shadows pressing against her, suffocating. Too valuable? The voice rasped. Or too dangerous? The shadows danced furiously, weaving a tapestry of despair just inches from her skin, time twisted as she battled her instincts. The images of futures she saw before now flooded her mind, all of them twisted and dark. A cascade of shadowy figures unleashed chaos and devastation. She had to act, yet she couldn't fathom the weight of what she was about to do. Margaret. Lila's scream broke through. We don't have time. They're coming. Each breath became a struggle. Her fingers brushed the emergency switch, a wave of electricity coursing through her, mixing dread with adrenaline. What if this doesn't work? There was a heartbeat of silence. What if it does? The voice taunted again. You'll never know if you don't try now. Lila's voice cracked, urgency bubbling into sheer panic. Margaret's heart pounded as if every pulse could resonate with the shadow's unholy rhythm. In that instant, she grasped the truth in Dr. Chan's words. This device, this energy, they had unearthed something unprecedented, and now a decision lay before her. It could spell salvation or annihilation. With grit and resolve, she flipped the switch. Everything erupted. Shocking light erupted from the reactor, pouring into the cavernous lab and splintering the darkness around them like glass. It lit up the faces of her colleagues, reflecting a kaleidoscope of emotions: hope, fear, anticipation, but as the light surged out, a chilling eruption of shadows roared back, shrieking with a voice full of rage and loss. The darkness struck at the light like a storm. Hold on! Dr. Chan shouted, his voice barely audible over the cacophony, pulling Lila back from the seething edge of the shadow tide. Margaret's heartbeat quickened. I can't contain it! She yelled, watching in horror as tendrils of darkness began wrapping around the reactor's output, aiming to overload it. Then, from within the shadows, a figure lurked, a silhouette that twisted and morphed, a face emerging, only to vanish again. It was watching her. Laughing, perhaps. What have you unleashed? The voice thundered, a familiar tone suffused with malevolence. It pierced through the chaos, freezing the air in the lab. Margaret's pulse raced as she recognized it, the CEO's voice, once authoritative, now a harbinger of doom. Run! She shouted, panic flooding her veins as the shadows roared. But this time, the shadows weren't just seeking darkness. They were coming for Margaret. As the room spiraled into turmoil, a new thought crystallized in her mind. She wasn't running away from the darkness, she was running toward it. What truth lay entwined in that shadowy laughter? The air thrummed with dread, and all Margaret could think was, what would she become to confront the monsters hidden in the void? And then, with all her heart, she asked, what's the price? Margaret felt the weight of uncertainty pressing down on her as the shadows roared around her. The air crackled, charged with impending doom. She couldn't just run. There was no path to escape. It was as if the darkness had configured itself specifically to block every route. Margaret! Lila's voice was laced with terror. It pulled at Margaret's core like a lifeline tossed into choppy waters. We need to go. But stay she must. The familiar presence lurking within the shadows drew her in a gravity she couldn't ignore. Where? To what? She murmured to herself, her fingertips still tingling from flicking the switch. The light brightened for a moment, illuminating the contours of fear etched on Dr. Chan's face. Margaret, stop! He yelled, his voice a desperate plea. Think. We need a plan. She forced her attention back to the chaotic swirl. The shadows whispered promises of power. Her heart skipped at the thought of everything they could unlock if only she would embrace it. At that moment, fear battled with the tantalizing lure of control. Suddenly, a spark of clarity pierced through the tumultuous confusion. Lila! She called. We have to harness the light, focus it. With newfound determination, she rushed toward the console, eyes darting between the array of intimidating switches and dials, recalling the theoretical designs they had meticulously outlined. What are you talking about? Lila's voice trembled, confusion mingled with desperation. It can't just be destruction. We need to redirect the energy, create a shield against the darkness. I might be able to fend it off long enough, if I can stabilize the output. Each thought snowballed, and she reached for the controls. But, just as she did, the shadows intensified. Pulsing like a living thing, they surged forward, reaching with jagged edges. The dark figure within laughed again, a sound that sent chills racing down her spine. Foolish child! Do you think the light will save you? The voice bellowed, echoing off the lab walls. You remain oblivious to the truth. Margaret's resolve wavered. The warmth she felt from the reactor began to cool, the light dimming ominously. She focused again, summoning every ounce of will to resist the beckoning shadows. "Don't listen. Lila," she commanded, her voice sharper now. "Help me keep it steady." Lila joined her, hands trembling yet determined, as they worked side by side to manipulate the dials. The reactor hummed louder, pushing back against the encroaching darkness. With every twist they made, the shadows thrashed angrily, hungry for their reaction. "Is it working?" Lila shouted. The answer hung in the air, thick with tension. Margaret swallowed hard, sweat pooling at her brow. I think so." Suddenly, the lights dimmed again, shadows coiling tighter. A flicker of doubt shot through her veins, the weight of her choice pressing heavily upon her chest. Each heartbeat echoed the uncertain promise: would they really be able to fend off the threat? Would they risk it all for a chance? Then, as if sensing the moment of hesitation, the shadowy figure erupted into the light, looming sheer terror. "You cannot hold it back forever. You will only strengthen me." Time slowed. Margaret's breath quickened, each inhale catching in her throat like shards of glass. She only had seconds to decide her course. Would she confront the figure, or would she have to embrace the darkness to understand her fate? Tension surged, weaving through every fiber of her being. In that one weighty moment, Margaret clung to the thought: what if the truth she feared most was actually the key to her survival? And then, they came, the piercing shrieks of the shadows. The last question lingered, vibrating against the walls of her mind. What line was she willing to cross to win this nightmarish battle? "Margaret!" Dr. Chan shouted, breaking her trance. "Now or never." The moment to act had come and the shadows held their breath, waiting for her choice. Margaret's heart hammered in her chest, a frantic drumbeat echoing in the chaos. The shadowy figure loomed larger, its malevolent form coiling and twisting as if seeking to break free from the darkness. The shrieks grew louder, a symphony of despair threatening to drown her resolve. "Now or never. Margaret, focus." Dr. Chan's voice cut through the noise, his urgency pressing against her like a physical weight. With every breath, she could feel the chill of the shadows creeping closer, curling around her ankles like serpents ready to strike. "Right!" she shouted, the word bursting from her mouth. It was time to act. She had to find a way to manipulate the energy. The shadows hungered for her hesitation, for any crack in her resolve. Fingers trembling, she twisted a dial, directing the light's flow. The console flickered violently, illuminating the lab in sporadic bursts. Sweat beaded on her forehead, and her stomach churned as she adjusted another switch. "Lila!" Margaret called, desperation creeping into her voice. "Lock that energy channel. We need to stabilize it." Lila nodded, her eyes wide with fear but filled with a fierce determination. She gripped a control lever, her hands shaking. "I'm with you." As they worked, the dark figure flickered like a faulty bulb, emanating laughter that clawed at Margaret's sanity. "You're fighting a losing battle. The truth you seek to hide will consume you." "Shut up!" she screamed, pushing the load further, summoning every ounce of her energy. The reactor pulsed, a throbbing heartbeat that matched the frantic rhythm of her mind. Then, everything changed. The shadows screeched as the light surged forth, illuminating the lab in a blinding array of brilliance. "Yes!" Lila shouted, nearly overcome with triumph. But victory was short-lived. As the shadows recoiled, an unearthly howl erupted from the figure. It writhed, morphing into something grotesque, part human and part nightmare. "You dare resist me?" it thundered, the voice morphing into a deep rumble that shook the very walls. Margaret's heart plummeted. They had provoked it. The darkness intensified, swirling with an intensity that made her feel weightless, as if she were suspended in a void, lost, helpless. "Margaret! The energy levels!" Dr. Chan's voice pierced through the haze. They're spiking. We need to redirect before the light vibrated with so much energy that it burst. But she didn't just redirect the light, she redirected the fear. Margaret seized the moment, gathering the light around her like a tangible shield. Closing her eyes, she envisioned herself as the anchor, the firewall against the encroaching darkness. Trust in the light. She whispered, breathless as she felt it respond, wrapping around her like a warm embrace while battling against the swirling shadows, and then a deafening silence, as if the world itself held its breath. The light momentarily held the shadows at bay, but the figure's laughter twisted into a shriek, full of ire and pain, echoing in her mind. The truth is not what you think, child. You have only scratched the surface. What did that even mean? Was there more to the shadows than mere darkness? That tantalizing thought flickered against the edge of her consciousness, a flicker of hope tangled with dread. Keep it steady. Lila cried, her voice shaky as she pulled more energy into the reactor. She was losing ground, and the shadows hungered for them, circling like wolves eager to finish their prey. Margaret steadied herself, her thoughts racing. She felt the pulse of the reactor, the heartbeat of the lab rising and falling. Reality warped, bending under the weight of their struggle. Would this light be enough? Would her resolve hold? Don't give up. Dr. Chan barked, desperation woven into his words, but Margaret couldn't shake the premonition that the fight was far from over. With the shadows screeching in rage, she couldn't help but wonder if confronting the truth behind them would unearth a horror even more profound than she could imagine. As the walls of the lab trembled, she understood one thing: they were on the edge of something monumental, perhaps the very answer that could shift the balance of power. But at what cost? She opened her eyes, gazing into the darkness, waiting hungrily for her choice, and the question loomed larger than any shadow: what lay beyond the next layer of truth, and was she ready to face it? The cacophony hung in the air like a thunderstorm, shadows swirling and pulsating, tentacles of darkness clawing at their reality. Margaret's heart raced. She felt the pull of the abyss, its icy whisper weaving through her thoughts, tempting her to cross into the unknown. Focus. Dr. Chan's urgent shout snapped her back to the now. The reactor roared to life, energy crackling like a live wire, illuminating the space in chaotic bursts. Margaret gripped the console tighter, sweat dripping down her brow, feeling the intense weight of her decisions pressing heavily on her heart. Here goes. She yelled, pushing the settings further. The reactor trembled beneath her fingers, the shadows recoiling in response. The balance was precarious, a dance on the edge of oblivion. This was the moment they had worked for. Hope surged through her veins like wildfire. As the blinding light enveloped them, she caught glimpses of her colleagues, fear etched on their faces, resolve flickering like fragile candle flames, battling against the overwhelming darkness. Their eyes echoed her own desperation, urging her to finish this once and for all. Keep the energy steady. Lila's voice rang out, steadying the wavering light around them. The shadows writhed like a living entity, thrashing against the barriers forged from their collective will. But then, the dark figure lunged, its form twisting through the air like smoke wrapping around a flame yearning for life. Foolish children. It bellowed, its growl carrying a weight that sent shivers down their spines. You cannot contain what you do not understand. No! Shouted Margaret, her voice strong, breaking through the overwhelming noise. You don't get to dictate the terms here. In that moment, clarity broke through the chaos. She wasn't just fighting to survive, she was fighting for the truth. Redirect the light. She commanded, urgency trembling in her words. Use the frequency of the shadows against them. Dr. Chan and Lila nodded, understanding lighting up their faces as if they were synchronized in this dance of fate. They adjusted their controls, pouring their focus into the light, channeling it like a focus stream against the turbulent waves of darkness. The room trembled as shadows collided with light, creating a spectacle of surreal brilliance. Sparks flew, illuminating the room in bursts of color, the struggle transforming into a symphony of unlikely harmony. Suddenly, the blinding white light surged, and for a breathless moment, the shadows halted, caught in a web of energy. The dark figure writhed in agony, its laughter twisting into an ear-piercing shriek of defiance. You think this is victory? You have only delayed the inevitable. But in that moment of shimmering brightness, Margaret saw something amidst the chaos, a flicker of clarity hidden within the darkness, a core of truth that shone brightly despite the storm surrounding it. No, she whispered, and as those words passed her lips, the realization struck her like a lightning bolt: they were not merely fighting against the shadows. They were unveiling them. Margaret. Dr. Chan's voice cut through the haze. What are you waiting for? We need to push harder. Let us show it. She roared, her voice echoing with newfound power. The room shook as they combined their efforts, blending light and frequency, creating ripples that began to resonate at the very heart of their enemy. Suddenly, the room ignited, a vortex of light swirling before them, but this time it was not just about survival. It was a revelation. The shadows began to tremble, losing their chaotic edge, slowly morphing into discernible shapes. Faces formed from the void, eyes glimmering like lost stars, revealing a depth of pain and longing. Stop! Cried the figure amidst the shadows, its voice now quivering. You do not know who you are challenging. What you are is nothing but a reflection of our fears, Margaret proclaimed, emboldened by the beckoning truth. You've thrived on our dread. But now we choose to see. With that, she began to channel every ounce of energy, pouring her emotions, the pain, the fears, the persistence of hope into a singular pulse. Dr. Chan, Lila, and the others followed suit, their shared energies intertwining into the raw power of determination. Everything shifted, the shadows reshaped, and the darkness cracked, unveiling memories held captive. A wave of realization washed over Margaret, a surge connecting her to every lost moment that echoed through the hallway of dread and despair. Once they were shadows, but now they flickered with histories of laughter, longing, terror gone unexpressed. As the pulsating energy swirled stronger, Margaret realized, the shadows were not just an enemy but pieces of themselves they had feared to face. Face us! She roared, her heart igniting with the fire of unity. We are not afraid. The beam of light exploded forth and met the shadows in a climactic clash. The energy channeled with vigor and valor, and with one final push, the shadows broke apart, dissolving back into the fabric of what they once were, a flaming connection within themselves. When the rush faded, quiet stepped in like an old friend. They stood in the remains of the laboratory, panting, heart still racing, yet enveloped in a thick haze of silence as they processed the overwhelming truth. Margaret Lila's voice broke through the stillness. Did we win? She looked at her colleagues, their eyes wide with newfound realization, the remnants of fear lingering but transformed into something stronger. We faced them together, she replied. And we're just getting started. With weary hearts and spirits ignited by the fire of bravery, they walked out into the faint light that heralded a new dawn, ready for whatever truths awaited them in the realms ahead. The mansion now stood still against the horizon, its secrets lingering like a tapestry woven with shadows and light, a reminder that beneath every fear lay the potential for truth and hope. And with that farewell, Margaret knew, it wasn't simply about fighting darkness, it was about understanding it, and through understanding, rising far beyond it. Now, before we wrap this up, you need to subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive stories. This is the moment to show your support. Smash the like button now to feed the algorithm, because it really helps showcase these stories. And don't forget to flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about this ending. I want to hear every thought you have. Finally, don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Let us spread the message and the adventure together.